I'm Harriet.
And I'm Matt.
And in this 3-part series we'll be cycle touring across Europe, from our home in London to Istanbul on the edge of Asia.
And in this first episode, we cycle from our home in London to Harwich, where we take the overnight ferry to the Hook of Holland and continue up to Amsterdam. We then head south through the Netherlands and join the Eurovelo 15 on the River Rhine and continue into Germany via its spectacular Rhine gorge and numerous castles, before reaching the stunning city of Strasbourg in France and beautiful Basle in Switzerland. Here the river heads east to the dramatic Rheinfalls, then briefly into Austria and Liechtenstein, before ending this section of our journey in Chur, Switzerland. The River Rhine in particular is an incredibly enjoyable adventure that really anyone who can ride a bike can do. Following the Eurovelo 15 is easy, the route is really well signposted, and there are plenty of excellent campsites or hotels. We'll also discuss about how we planned our route, how we cooked and what we ate, how we stayed hydrated, daily costs, and talk about the importance of taking time off.
For complete novices like us, it was also nice to see plenty of other cycle tourists. Whether you ride up or down river, you can complete the entire route in a 2-week holiday, or if you take it a little more leisurely with a day off now and then as we did, 3 to 4 weeks is more than enough.
The beauty of the Eurovelo network is that more often than not they link together at some point, which really helps with planning, especially if you want to do a loop or head on a much longer journey. The routes are planned to wherever possible take flat scenic paths away from roads and near to accommodation and bike shops. This is certainly the case for on the Rhine, less so on other routes and as we head into Eastern Europe in episode 2. We didn't even get a single puncture along the Rhine, but we did break a few spokes, and it was always great to know that assistance was nearby. So to kick things off, we're going to show you how we got ourselves and our bikes to the Netherlands and then down to the Eurovelo 15 and the Rhine itself.
We left on a scorching day in London and cycled via our normal commute into Shepherd's Bush, through central London and past Buckingham Palace. Our first night was spent at the excellent Osier campsite on the Essex coast, about 100 kilometres away. We had a classic English dinner of fish and chips and a pint, and then headed to Harwich the next day, from where we took the overnight ferry to Holland. And we're off! Morning!
Morning! So let's go! Rolling off the ferry after a good night's sleep was incredibly exciting. It really felt like the start of our big trip, and we look forward to riding the famously smooth, segregated, well-linked Dutch cycle paths, especially after coming from the UK. We weren't going to join the Eurovelo 15 just yet, as we instead decided on a little detour to Amsterdam, famously one of the most cycle-friendly cities on the planet, with its nearly 800 kilometres of cycle lanes and more bicycles than people. We'd essentially be skipping 2 days of the Eurovelo and rejoining it shortly after Amsterdam. Looking back on our tour, taking little breaks is something we really recommend, as it can give your body a rest, be something extra to look forward to, and can really only add to the whole experience. I'd always dreamt of a big ride, and so one weekend back in 2016, I decided to test the water with Harriet and suggest a camping trip, just using our bikes. Harriet had a very old mountain bike from childhood, and I had my old road bike and just a backpack.
We started with a 25-mile each-way round trip, cycling along the safe canals west out of London, and enjoyed a balmy summer's evening and pub dinner. We returned home the next day feeling like we'd been on a real adventure and dreamt of more. Over the next few years, we slowly accumulated all the kit we felt we really needed, and we'll cover this list later on in the video.
We decided we wanted to cycle to Istanbul as it was where we had our first holiday together, and the idea of cycling across a whole continent sounded pretty cool. After some basic research, we worked out how long we'd need off work and eventually arranged our sabbaticals. We wanted to follow dedicated routes where possible rather than just go as a crow flies, and from researching on the Eurovelo website, the entire Eurovelo 15 Rhine route is approximately 1,200 kilometres and can be done in 2 weeks, from the Netherlands to Switzerland or vice versa. But we wanted to take it at a more leisurely pace, and also factor in days off whenever we fancied a break, or came across somewhere we particularly liked. We then looked at finding another Eurovelo route to take us east, and found the Eurovelo 6 Danube route, which we'll cover in episode 2. This route from the source in Germany to the Black Sea is almost 3,000 kilometres, so nearly 3 times longer. Then the final section to Istanbul was a bit of an unknown, but we'd hoped to be fully fledged cycle touring adventurers by then, so planned on winging that bit later on. It turned out that after talking to other cyclists en route, that to head south along the EV13 through the Balkans could be very interesting, which was definitely true. We'll get to that in episode 3.
So back to the Rhine. We gave ourselves a month to get from London to Switzerland, where we then planned to meet my family for my dad's 60th birthday. A nice sort of halfway break, if you will, before we started the next major stage.
This region of the Netherlands is home to the largest river delta in Europe. We headed just south of Utrecht to the River Lek, one of the many distributaries of the River Rhine that you can follow all the way to the North Sea, or as in our case, towards the River Rhine itself. It was an easy day's cycle from Amsterdam, and we stayed at the excellent Camping Everstein before continuing down towards the Rhine.
Looks like it's going to rain at some point, so we've got our jackets in the top, but if you get wet, you get wet. Lots of sheep. Morning, sheep! We should get to the River Rhine by tomorrow, and then from there we're on the Eurovelo, which should be really easy to follow, hopefully. So. Here we go.
This is our first Eurovelo route sign. It's joining 15. Our last day in the Netherlands and then down into Germany tomorrow.
Reaching our first Eurovelo signpost at Wijk Duurstede was a real milestone and pretty comforting too, as all we had to do now was to simply follow the EV15 signs and we knew we'd be in Switzerland eventually. So how did we work out where we were going to stay? It was remarkably simple. Our guidebook gave us distances to each town, village or camping ground, and we'd usually plan where we wanted to be for the next 2 or 3 nights. By counting ahead too, we could calculate where we'd want to be in, say, a month's time. Using a cycle computer to track how many kilometres we'd cycled each day worked perfectly. It meant we didn't have to rely on phones for Strava or battery power. It was also handy to see on the handlebars just how far in we were each day, which is great for planning where we want to stop for lunch. Finding and planning lunch, by the way, was a real source of daily excitement. Sometimes we knew we'd hit a nice town or a city for a fancy cafe lunch, and sometimes we'd be popping into a bakery or supermarket to make a big cheesy baguette ready for a quiet riverside picnic spot. And nearly always we'd find somewhere for a local pastry. By the way, it is true that you can really eat as much as you want when cycle touring. Give yourself a goal of say 3 PM for that treat chocolate bar or that vanilla slice that you picked up in the last town. Little routines and targets like this really help the days along, particularly in the more monotonous areas or if the weather isn't great. Most days though you'll see the time fly by as there's just so much to see and you never really know what's around the next corner. Each day is so different to the next and in our eyes it's just the most amazing way to travel. If you're watching this and planning your own first big trip, we're genuinely really excited for you. Back to the Rhine, and another great thing about our Cicerone guidebook is that it's packed with plenty of historical and general information. We learnt that Wijk Duurstede is home to the world's only drive-through windmill, something of course we had to tick off. Following the Eurovelo 15 was a breeze. We saw loads of families taking on parts of the route. Many kids had full-on kiddie panniers, and some still had stabilisers. This is something we really hope to do in the near future. We passed through the historic city of Arnhem before reaching Camping Valstrand near Millingen, situated on the confluence of the Niederrhein and the River Vaal. At this campsite, all the tent spots were actually full when we arrived in late July, but the cycle-loving Dutch owners kindly allowed us just to camp by the river and even use the electricity from a nearby caravan to charge our power packs. Because it was summer, we found this happen several times on our Rhine cycle, but there was always a solution or another campsite nearby. You can of course find a quiet field, wait until dusk and wild camp. We valued having a safe place to sleep, recharge, cook and wash.
So this is the entry point for the Ghent-Millingen ferry, and as you can see, again it's really well signposted for all the cycle routes, which is awesome. And we just go down here, open the gate, wait for the ferry. We're in no rush today, we've got a pretty chilled out, only 45 or so kilometres today, so it should be good. I'll show you where we are. So we are here and we're going to go down to Millingen, and that's where the border of Germany is. So very exciting to get to our second country. Morning. Morning. So you can see that, the Rhine River, which is Eurovelo 15. This feels like we've really begun our trip now, it really does. Let's go through here, just drive straight through the calf. So this is the river, we're going to follow all the way down to Switzerland. It's our first little coffee stop on the River Rhine. Really cool little bike cafe. Wow, it's got bike memorabilia and stuff. How should you get one of these in the garden? Eurovelo, going well so far in Germany. Really nice, very flat and very smooth. Every time there's a bit of shade as well, we'll have a little quick stop, quick bite to eat, banana, bit of water, have a little stretch, and then go again.
Continuing south into Germany, still puncture-free thanks to our Schwalbe Marathon Plus tyres, we cycled through the heavily populated and industrial Lower Rhine, through Duisburg, the delightful Dusseldorf, and then the largest city on the Rhine, Cologne. The ride was again pretty easy to follow, however in the cities you have to be quite eagle-eyed to spot the Eurovelo signs, and occasionally we'd get Google Maps up to find accommodation, or if we lost the Eurovelo, simply head back to the river.
We've arrived in Cologne at 62 kilometres, a bit more than we planned today. We got lost 4 times this week. But we're here, and this is Cologne.
We made it to Cologne. Decided to treat ourselves.
The biggest ice cream we could find.
I think it's got every single thing in it. Look at that. What a Sunday that was. Oh, well deserved. And now we're just cycling to the campsite. It's about 8k south of Cologne. But first we're gonna go to Lidl and get some food for dinner. Bangers and mash is on the menu. This is our campsite just south of Cologne, and they've got their own kitchen. we don't have to cook on a really sandy floor tonight, which is going to be amazing. And best thing ever, we get a table. A table to prepare everything.
Leaving Cologne and the Lower Rhine, we head into the UNESCO heritage Middle Rhine and the Rhine Gorge. Arguably one of the prettiest and most enjoyable sections of the Rhine cycle route, we start in Bonn, the birthplace of Beethoven, before gorgeous little Bad Breisig and its quaint riverside cafes, and then a little side visit to the Andernach Geyser, the tallest cold water geyser in the world. We then pass through the city of Koblenz, built at the confluence of the Moselle and the Rhine.
We're going to be having some nice picnic here because we're absolutely starving. Fairly standard for us really. Got a bit of meat, got some cheese, tomato, some baguettes. Starving after a hot morning cycle. It's always one of the best parts of the day when you get somewhere really cool like this and you find a nice little picnic spot and we can just have a massive filled baguette. It makes us very happy.
We could barely fix a poncho before we left, and to be honest our skills haven't really improved much since. We met a friendly Geordie at a campsite who showed us how to clean our chains, and as we were now 2 weeks in, a fair bit of gunk had accumulated. With Eastern Europe and the Balkans coming up next month, we knew we needed to spend more time on general maintenance and promised to do a quick clean every few days and ensure the tyres are at the right pressure. Next up is the historic wine growing area of Boppard and Bacharach.
Basically a map that we're following. As I said before, we're doing the Rhine sort of the opposite direction, so we're looking at this backwards a little bit. But we're going to Rüdesheim today, which is the second most popular tourist destination in Germany. Who knew? And we're going to see loads of castles basically. And then we're going to finish at a place called Geusenheim, and this is where the campsite has a vineyard.
Yeah, house wine and terrace on the other side. So we've arrived into Bacharach, where we plan to have lunch at about 32 kilometres this morning from the campsite. And the supermarket here doesn't open until 2 o'clock, so no lunch until then, which is a bit of a shame. But instead of getting annoyed, we've come to have a nice cold beer and
roast.
Take it easy.
At the southern end of the Middle Rhine, we pass the 14th century Rhine Castle and the Clement Chapel before we hop on a ferry and cross over to Rüdesheim.
So we're just on the ferry from Bingen over on the south side of the river over to Rüdesheim. And it's famous for the amazing Germania statue at the top there. And there's a cable car that goes up there too, which is pretty cool. And our campsite's only about 6k from here, so not long to go now. We're very, very, very hot and ready for some wine.
Backed by vineyards and packed with history, Rüdesheim is a gloriously picturesque riverside town. We, however, are here for the famous Rüdesheimer coffee.
Wow, brandy, coffee, and then fresh cream. Rüdesheimer coffee.
Yes, please. So, bitteschön.
Good? Ooh, very tired now. Been a very hot day and we just got to the campsite. It looked absolutely awful. You know, we're fortunate enough that there's quite a few campsites around, so you can pick and choose sometimes. Decided to carry on another 8-9k. Looked on the map and there's another campsite coming up here somewhere in about 4k's time. It looks really nice. They mentioned wine straight away on their website, so bodes well. completely changed as well. The whole landscape's changed. It's all really, really flat now, and the riverbed is huge. There's lots of islands and little inlets and things. Compared to about 2 hours ago, and we're going through the most amazing gorges. So it's been one of the best days scenically, that's for sure.
As we left the Middle Rhine and its dramatic Rhine gorge, we entered the Upper Rhine, one of the most developed parts of the Eurovelo 15, which stretches from Mainz all the way to Basle. Passing through Mainz and Worms, we overnight in a hotel in Mannheim, where we treated ourselves to an all-you-can-eat Chinese. I also used the opportunity to buy a new multi-USB adapter to charge our 2 power packs. As we rode along, or when we're in campsites, we use these portable charging packs to charge all of our tech, including our phones, lights, our tablet, mini speaker, the camera, and even our DJI Spark drone.
Leaving modern Mannheim, fully rested and with our bellies and batteries full, we soon made it to one of Germany's oldest towns, Speyer. From here we continue south through empty farmland, with easy smooth riding until pretty Germersheim.
It's so hot that we need to go for a little cool down.
Oh dear. I think we might be staying.
Normally we'd arrive mid-afternoon or at least a few hours before dark, and we'd scout the campsite looking for a nice quiet shady spot and then put up the tent. Then while one of us was perhaps blowing up the beds and prepping dinner, the other would grab a shower, which also doubles as a good chance to wash clothes. We'd then hang the washing on our handy peg-free travel line, and everything would usually be dry by the morning. On cooler days, we'd simply wear the second clothing option and tiny wet clothes on the back of our panniers to dry as we cycled. Once both showered and in our fresh set of day clothes, we'd often crack open a beer or a wine and get cooking.
Just to prove that you can make some epic foods when camping. We've got pork steaks, lovely bit of smash, and we've got some veggies as well. Got on there, we've got red cabbage, haven't we? Delish.
A hybrid or touring bike we think is best for the Rhine route, as there are some long stretches of gravel and small off-road sections. There's plenty of videos out there for more information on bike choice, but especially for trial runs back home, any bike will do. There are also tons of videos on how to pack your bike, but it's really just trial and error. Do try to invest in good quality Ortlieb panniers though if you can. My old panniers didn't last 3 weeks on the road without tearing, so I had to buy a waterproof liner, but Harriet's Ortliebs came back as good as new. So now let's talk more about cooking and camping. But first it's worth mentioning that we are both huge foodies, and we didn't want camping or a strict budget to get in the way of eating well.
We spent a lot of time thinking about what size and which type of tent to take, and eventually went for the MSR Elixir 3-person with its easy clip system.
So this is the first time we've put up our new, no, it's obviously new, it's the first time we put it up. This is the first time we've put up our MSR Elixir 3 tent.
Should we have a look inside?
Go for it.
Inside there was plenty of headroom with handy mesh pockets literally everywhere, and spacious porch areas outside both of the doors to keep our panniers hidden overnight, leaving more room for inside. Later on, as the hot dry summer became a bit more changeable, we picked up a tarpaulin to use as an extension to our tent, perfect for cooking under if it was raining. Knowing the importance of a good hearty meal and being able to make a cup of coffee in the morning, having a decent, reliable stove was a must, and we went for the MSR Whisperlight Universal. Whichever stove you go for, we really recommend a few trial runs before you set off. This lightweight, hard-wearing stove took both gas and petrol, which later on in Eastern Europe became very handy. Many campsites had benches and tables, and some had full-on canteens where you could go and cook and use a microwave and a fridge, but we highly recommend having at least a small ground tarpaulin, so you could basically lay out your table on the floor without getting grass and mud and bugs into your food. So what do we eat? The staples of our diet changed throughout the trip, but I'd usually wake up first and get some water boiling for our morning coffee, and then boil up some more for porridge. I'd make it a bit tastier and more nutritious with whatever we had, usually sultanas, peanut butter and some fruit. This we found sustained us a lot more than eggs and bread, and was easier to transport with no real risk of it going off.
Good morning. It's about 6:30 and I'm just up for sunrise, gonna go for a little swim.
This morning routine was actually one of my favourite parts about the trip. Waking up in a new location every day, with the fresh morning air and the birds tweeting, and often exchanging a few hellos with other tourists doing the same thing. We'd usually carry with us 2 full water bottles each, plus a 3-litre platypus which laid on top of our pannier rack. Most campsites had free drinking water, but we also found plenty of fountains in the towns. For dinner, we'd usually stop at a shop by around mid-afternoon, pick up some fruit and things for a snack, and then just basically buy whatever's on offer. The most popular options were, as I've already said, the famous smash with pork steaks and red cabbage, my all-time favourite, or making chicken fajitas, making spag bowl, cheesy tuna pasta, cheesy vegetable pasta, chicken pesto pasta, and a very hearty goulash from a tin.
Goulash!
Goulash. Leftover tomatoes and mushrooms, and also peas and carrots from a tin.
Most campsites also had a little shop for backup food, as well as ice cream and a fridge full of local beer and wine.
Before we left, we worked out a rough daily budget of around €50 to €60 a day for both of us, by considering costs for camping and the odd hotel, daily meals including snacks.
We've got some currywurst. It's our first one of Germany. Look at that.
Treat meals out when in cities, and a little extra contingency for ferry crossings or maintenance. What we didn't perhaps factor in is the regular attraction of a cold lunchtime beer and some extra kit we bought along the way. Overall though, for the Rhine section, we averaged €75 a day between us. In episode 2, as we reached Eastern Europe, costs nearly halved, even with more hotel stays.
Day 16. We are nearly hitting 1,000 kilometers. Oh, how's it slowing down? Oh, here we go. 1,000 kilometers! We did it!
The first 1,000.
First 1,000. We've got a long way to go still, but that is a big milestone and it feels fantastic.
Yeah.
Woo, look at that. And now we've seen our first signs for France. Allez le bleu. Up there, we're heading towards Lauterbourg, and then tomorrow we'll be in Strasbourg, and that's where we're going to have our next little mini break, a couple of days off. We're at the French-Germany border, en France. Just found one of the best lunch spots I think we've ever had so far on this trip in Munchausen. It's under a really lovely bit of shade, it's dead quiet, right by the river, lots of swans and
Quite a few herons as well.
quite a few herons as well. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Just got to our first campsite in France. So hot, très chaud, très chaud. Just wish we had like a big swimming pool or something to jump into. But we got a massive lake to jump into! Woohoo! €13 a night as well, this place. Nearly half the cost of the crappy little campsite we were in Germany last night. This is amazing. Loads of people come here from like nearby apparently and just come out and chill out. You can see why. So nice. So we're just gonna literally dump our stuff and jump in right away. Oh yeah.
Leaving the lovely camping plage Duurstede, we headed south to Strasbourg, where we had a few nights in a cheap hotel to rest up and explore this beautiful city.
Welcome to Strasbourg.
We highly recommend Strasbourg. We found it to be a really friendly, small enough city to simply wander the ancient streets and enjoy some incredible food.
Platonk, not platonk, platonk, oui. So we're loving Strasbourg. Hugely recommend coming here for a couple of days if you can. We're really happy we've got a couple of nights for our little mini break. And then after this we'll be heading south to Basle.
It's phenomenal.
We continued south through the wine-growing region of Alsace, famous for its stronger Rieslings. The riding was incredibly easy, following the EV15 along the Canal du Rhône au Rhin for what seemed an eternity, nearly all the way to the tri-point, where France meets Germany and Switzerland on the edge of Basel.
Here we are. We're at the triangle of France, Germany and Switzerland along the Rhine, and we're just about to go through this tiny section of Germany and into Switzerland shortly. This is the border of Germany and Switzerland, and we literally just crossed over from France, and here we are, Monte and Komodo, made it to Switzerland. So this is Basel, and this is pretty much where all the Rhine River cruises all finish or start, because when we go up river a bit more we get to the Rheinfalls, and the boats obviously can't go through the Rheinfalls.
We stopped at a bike shop in town to briefly fix a broken spoke on Harriet's bike, and for the first time since London and the Netherlands we started to head east.
So we're just following the Eurovelo 15 and the Eurovelo 6, they sort of combine here for a while.
We crisscross between Switzerland and Germany as we continue east towards the Rheinfalls.
And we're just going back into Germany for lunch. We're cycling along the Swiss side, but apparently the German side is a lot nicer on the Eurovelo. Lunch would be a hell of a lot cheaper as well. So, but what a beautiful, beautiful spot. That's the bridge that just connected us from Switzerland to Germany. It's never going to get old, that is it, when you're in a different country, but you can see the other one, and we just decide, oh, should we have lunch in Germany or Switzerland? So we just reached Bad Sackingen, and here is the longest covered bridge on the Rhine, and we're just about to go over it. A lot of cobbles in these old streets. They're very pretty, but not very cycle friendly.
This is Laufenburg. It used to be all one town, and then it was Napoleon. Yeah, Napoleon, 1801, said no, that's the country border. There's now Swiss Laufenburg on the right and German Laufenburg on the left.
This is a really, really nice part of the Eurovelo 15. We're just following a fantastic little cycle path. Scenery just surprises you around every corner.
vending machine for bicycle inner tubes. Isn't that wonderful?
So it's a continuation of the Eurovelo 6 and 15, route number 2 in Switzerland. Again, it's off-road, but the going's not too bad, it's not too bumpy.
This heavenly spot.
As soon as we've dried off, we're going to start sweating again now, because we're going up a seriously steep hill. I mean, all relative considering it's been flat until Switzerland. Bloody hell. Yes, nearly there. What a day, what an amazing day.
The Rheinfalls are the most powerful falls in Europe and definitely one of the highlights of the Rhine cycle route. We were now less than a week away from the end, but as was typical of this cycle tour, there were so many highlights still to come. We overnighted in Schaffhausen in Switzerland before riding through some scenic countryside and popping back into Germany at the fairy tale-like town of Geilingen am Hochrhein. Across the Rhine here is Deisenhofen on the Swiss side, reached by yet another covered bridge. I'd never even heard of a covered bridge before, but we soon began to see more and more of these historic wooden marvels. This one dates back to the early 1800s and was arguably one of our favourites. We then reached the little medieval town of Stein am Rhein, famous for its painted frescoes, where we stopped for a bite to eat.
Welcome to Stein am Rhein.
And I've got an incredible vanilla slice, my favourite type of cake. Has got a small slice of rhubarb, what's it called?
Tart.
Rhubarb tart. And we've got our coffee already, so saving money. Clever. Look at its place though, it's absolutely stunning. Woo!
That afternoon we reached the city of Konstanz, on the edge of yet another major attraction on the route, the vast Lake Constance, also known as the Bodensee. Here we decided to take the ferry over to the far cheaper German side of the lake and join the thousands of domestic tourists and have a mini summer holiday and take our next day off. After a day of pure relaxation at the beach, we then cycled around the lake and its stylish little towns, past expensive looking houses, to our last stop in Germany on the Rhine, Lindau. After a brief stop, we crossed into Austria and the lakeside city of Bregenz. Here we couldn't find any campsites or hotels, but we found a boat on Airbnb for less than a night's camping in Switzerland. We locked Monty and Komodo to the harbour railings, freshened up, and went out to explore the city.
Here we are in Bregenz and we're just going for a night out. Well, I say night out, a couple of beers.
The next morning we rode back into Switzerland on the EV15, flying along with a tailwind towards the mountains, with the valley wall closing in around us. We reached another covered bridge, this time one that took us into Vaduz, the capital of Liechtenstein. A new country for us both, we celebrated with an outrageously expensive hot chocolate and sheltered from the rain. We rode through this little city of just over 5,000 inhabitants and up to our campsite, where we'd take a few days off to rest up and to hike this spectacular section of the Alps.
We both knew nothing of this tiny yet towering country and were keen to explore. We were almost reaching the end of our Rhine journey, and Liechtenstein turned out to be one of the most beautiful places we have ever visited. The final leg took us back along the Rhine, along some of the most perfect cycling paths imaginable, through valleys and vineyards until we reached Chur, the oldest town in Switzerland. Our last night on the Rhine was spent in a typically well-equipped Swiss campsite. We stretched, ate and headed down to the river for an icy cool dip.
We found the Rhine route very manageable and, as you've seen, incredibly enjoyable. We did benefit from having glorious weather and minimal bike issues over these 4 weeks. This certainly changed as we headed towards the Balkans.
You can continue to the source high up in the mountains. We chose, however, to cycle to Reichenau, where the two Rhine tributaries meet, the Vorderrhein and the Hinterrhein, thus making this the official start of the River Rhine itself. We have loved the Rhine cycle route and we're incredibly impressed with the organisation of the Eurovelo 15, from its excellent signage to its choice of route. And we really hope this film helps to inspire others to take on the ride. Whether you head upriver like we did, or from Switzerland to the Hook of Holland, we're sure you're going to have the most incredible ride. Our journey now continues through Switzerland for a little holiday with Harriet's family, before we ride up to the source of the Danube and head east towards Romania, then south to Istanbul.